The gods of Arak. The spirit of life that had saturated primordial Draenor had birthed many kinds of animals. Nearly all of these beasts had been consumed by the evergrowth and the spore mounds. With the end of the evergrowth, animal life had a chance to take hold in the world again. The scattered remains of Bhutan had become forests teeming with the spirit of life. These energies transformed the land and accelerated the development of new species. The first beasts to arise were enormous creatures that wielded extraordinary power over the land. Some of them had an affinity to the nature magics that the Bhutani and the other primals had mastered. Others tapped into Draenor's elemental energies. Still others reached beyond the veil of reality, touching the forces of light and void that permeated the cosmos. Despite their considerable powers, Draenor's giant animals faced a daunting struggle for survival. The Bhutani ensnared them to use as food to nourish the wilds, or to infest them with fungi that transformed them into the primal's minions. Elsewhere, the Gron and the Ogron hunted beasts like game. The animals most suited to thrive on this unforgiven world were the winged species that could soar above the reach of the primals and the breakers. Most of Draenor's avian races developed in Arak. A massive stone spire towered over the region's dense woods and coastal scrublands. There, 3 godlike creatures took form: the majestic firebird Rokmar, the vicious wind serpent Seath, and the cunning raven Anzu. These animals were each powerful in their own right. Rokmar's spirit was touched by the primordial force of light. Her connection to the energy allowed her to summon enchanted flames that could either destroy life or nourish it. White-hot fire constantly ripped over her reddish-orange wings without ever singeing her. Seath's wings were short and leathery, and he could not fly as high as Rokmar. He had an affinity to the shadow energies, the void that existed in the universe. Anzu was much smaller than Rokmar and Seath. What he lacked in physical power, he made up for in keen intellect. Ever curious, Anzu investigated the magical ley lines that crisscrossed the world, and he discovered arcane magic. For many years, these 3 creatures largely kept to themselves. They eked out an existence in Arak, constantly fending off attacks from primals and breakers. Only Anzu dreamed of a better future for himself and his feathered kin. Anzu called on Rokmar and Seath to work together to transform Arak into a sanctuary for birds of all kinds. Why should they live under the oppression of primitives like the primals and the breakers, when they could rule this land for themselves? As one, Anzu and his new allies drove the children of stone and root from Arak. With the breakers and the primals gone, the region flourished into a haven for winged creatures. Rokmar, Seath, and Anzu settled in as caretakers of the land and its varied species. Rokmar developed close ties with the most beautiful birds, the Kaliri. She treated them as her own beloved children. She and the Kaliri spent much of their time perched at the apex of Arak's spire, basking in the warmth of the sun. Though Rokmar was noble, she was also arrogant. She saw herself as the epitome of grace and beauty among the world's creatures. She never set her talons on the ground, and she regarded the creatures that dwelled in and around the forest with disdain. Anzu watched over the multitude of lesser ravens that lived throughout Arak. He frequented the forest canopies below the spire. Seath ruled under the smaller wind serpents and lived there. Seath ruled the smaller wind serpents and lived with them among the shadowy nooks and crannies at the spire's base. He did not treat his followers with the same respect that Anu showed his ravens. Seath was a cruel and demanding master of the wind serpents. All seemed well in Arak, but darkness was stirring near the spire. The Curse of Seath. Over the years, Seath became envious of Rokmar, His wings were not as great as hers, and he could not soar through the clouds as she did. Seath could barely even reach the top of the spire. He was doomed to live out his existence in Rockmar's shadow. That was not a fate he would accept. Seath dreamed of striking down Rockmar and stealing her powers for himself, but he knew he could not do so alone. The Wind Serpent eventually approached Anzu and asked for his help. Once they had vanquished Rockmar, they would soar the roof of the world. They would reign as the twin kings of Arak. Seath had assumed that Anzu was jealous of Rockmar's powers as well. After all, the Firebird looked down on the Raven with scorn for dwelling so near the ground. Yet, Seath was wrong. Anzu did not hate Rockmar, he adored her. The Raven had long harbored a secret affection for the Firebird, but he had never mustered the courage to profess his feelings for her. He knew that Rockmar would never accept him as her equal. Anzu warned Rockmar of Seath's intentions. The Raven and the Firebird made a pact to work against the Wind Serpent. On the day Seath launched his attack, Rockmar was ready. She engulfed Seath in a fiery wrath and burned his wings to ash. When the Wind Serpent plummeted to the earth, Anzu fell upon him and clawed out his eyes. Seath used his dying breath to exact vengeance on Rockmar and Anzu. He wove a terrible curse through his own flesh and blood, one that seeped from his body and spread into the land itself. Fearing that the curse would destroy Arak, Anzu devoured Seath whole and locked the Wind Serpent's dark energy within himself. Excruciating pain raked the Raven as the curse twisted his body and soul. Anzu's form shriveled and warped, and he lost the ability to fly. Though he had paid a terrible price, Anzu had contained the curse. Only a small portion of Seath's blood was left behind. It corrupted the area where the Wind Serpent had fallen, but it did not spread. This shadowy region would later become known as Sethic Hollow. Anzu could not bear to present himself to Rockmar. If she had not thought him worthy before, she would be disgusted by the aberration he'd become. He disappeared into the forest deeps, and he ignored Rockmar whenever she called for the Raven to show himself. Though Seath's curse weakened Anzu, it also gave him new powers. Consuming the Wind Serpent had granted him command over dark magic. As Anzu grew more familiar with his abilities, he shrouded himself in a realm of shadow to hide from Rockmar forever. After much fruitless searching, Rockmar gave up. She was humbled by Anzu's noble sacrifice, but she was also horrified by the curse that now darkened her home. Rockmar took to the skies and left Arak. She finally settled atop Gorgon's highest peak. Rockmar decided that, if she could not find Anzu to thank him, she would reward his sacrifice by creating a new race in his honor. The Firebird drew on her own life energies to transform some of Valkyrie followers into a winged people called the Arakkoa, or the heirs of Arak. They embodied Rockmar's physical grace and majesty as well as Anzu's intellect and cleverness. Rockmar intended that the Arakkoa would one day return to Arak, but not yet. Seath's curse still lingered, and the Firebird did not want her new children to suffer from it. After they had matured as a race and become wise, Rockmar would lead them back to their ancestral home. Her only fear was that she would not live long enough to do so. Rockmar has expended much of her own life essence to create the Arakkoa. She would never be as powerful as she had once been. The Firebird knew she would eventually grow old and pass from the world. Before that happened, she was determined to help shape and guide the Arakkoa's culture.